A human prince was chosen by the princess. The court turned hostile. Its towers reached into the void, gleaming with metal and crystal, a testament to centuries of alien ingenuity. Inside its grand halls, the air buzzed with anticipation. Today was not just any day. It was the day Princess Lyra would announce her choice of consort, the future partner who would stand beside her in ruling the alien kingdom. Every eye in the court was fixed on her, the brilliant, confident princess who had captivated her people with wisdom beyond her years. In the center of the vast ceremonial hall, Irian, the human prince, stood with a calm that belied the storm of anxiety inside him. Humans had never been invited to these grand events. The palace's domed ceiling reflected lights and holographic banners that told the history of Xithuria. Irian's uniform, simple by Xithurian standards, marked him as an outsider, but he held his posture straight, his hands folded respectfully behind his back. He could feel the weight of thousands of alien eyes on him. "Are you sure about this?" Irian whispered to himself, adjusting the strap of the ceremonial sash across his chest. He had studied Xithurian etiquette, read every available account of their rituals, and practiced his speech endlessly, yet nothing could truly prepare him for the palpable tension in the hall. The doors opened, and the princess stepped into the room. Lyra's presence was commanding. Her silver robes shimmered as she moved, and her eyes, deep and thoughtful, swept over the gathered crowd. The court fell silent. Even the distant stars outside the massive windows seemed to pause, their light dimming under the brilliance of her authority. She approached the dais where the council of elders and nobles waited. "Today," she said, her voice clear and resonant, "I make a choice for the future of Xithuria. A choice not for convenience, not for tradition, but for the qualities I value most: courage, creativity, and compassion." There was a murmur in the crowd. The nobles exchanged glances, confusion and disbelief flickering across their features. Irian felt a tightening in his chest, sensing the coming storm, though he did not yet understand its full magnitude. Lyra continued, her gaze locking onto Irian. "I have chosen a human prince as my partner." A gasp swept through the court like a wave. Shock, outrage, and disbelief erupted simultaneously. Many nobles leaned forward in anger or disbelief, their mouths opening to challenge her decision. Some voices were sharp and harsh. "How dare you?" one elder demanded. "A human? They are not even of our world. This is a violation of everything our history stands for." Irian remained still, though his mind raced. He had expected some surprise, perhaps skepticism, but the intensity of the hostility was greater than he had imagined. Yet he also saw a few faces in the crowd, young officers, scholars, and citizens, whose eyes reflected curiosity rather than disdain. Perhaps not all were set in rigid tradition. The princess raised her hand, and the murmurs died down slightly. "He is not here to take our culture from us," she said firmly, her voice steady against the rising tide of anger. "He is here to learn, to contribute, and to stand beside me, not as a replacement for our ways, but as a partner who brings a perspective we often overlook. His qualities are those that will help our kingdom grow and survive in ways our traditions alone cannot." Irian swallowed hard and stepped forward, bowing deeply to the princess and the court. "I am honored by Princess Lyra's trust," he said, his voice steady though his heart raced. "I do not claim to know Xithuria as you do, but I promise to learn, to respect your people, and to serve the kingdom with all that I have. I will not be a burden or a distraction. I will be your ally, and through my actions, I hope to earn the respect of all who doubt me." Some of the nobles scoffed. Others were silent, considering his words. A counselor, tall and imposing, stepped forward. His scales shimmered with a bronze hue and his eyes burned with authority. "And if you fail, human?" he asked sharply. "If your ignorance leads to disaster, will the princess take responsibility? Can a human truly understand the responsibilities of the throne?" Irian did not flinch. He met the counselor's glare directly. "I may be human, but I am capable of learning and adapting," he replied. "Courage is not measured by origin, and wisdom is not limited to tradition. I will prove that humans, too, can contribute to the strength of Xithuria." The counselor sneered, but the murmurs in the hall shifted slightly. A few younger nobles nodded subtly. Irian could feel that small shift in perception, a tiny crack in the wall of hostility. Lyra stepped forward, her expression firm yet gentle. "Enough," she commanded. "This court is not just for the elders to enforce fear. It exists to serve the people of Xithuria." A human prince does not diminish our legacy, he strengthens it if we are willing to embrace new ideas. Despite her words, the tension in the room remained palpable. Irian could feel the whispers behind him, the eyes that followed his every move, some full of curiosity, others of disdain. The court was a storm, and he was standing at its center, unshielded but determined to hold his ground. After the ceremony, the crowd began to disperse, though not everyone left willingly. Irian found himself in a quiet corridor escorted by Lyra. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, her voice full of concern. He nodded, though his chest still thumped with adrenaline. "I will be." "But the hostility, it's stronger than I expected." Lyra smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and concern in her eyes. "They will test you, they will try to break your spirit, but that is why I chose you. You are not just a figurehead, Irian. You have the strength to face challenges we have not seen in generations. Do not forget why you are here." He looked at her, understanding the weight of her trust. It was not just a choice, it was a declaration of faith. A human in a court that had never welcomed one was being asked to prove himself not through birthright, but through action. That evening, Irian was taken to his quarters, a room that combined human comfort with Zithurian elegance. The walls glowed softly, responding to his movements, while the floor shimmered like liquid crystal. As he unpacked his few belongings, he thought about the journey ahead. He would face prejudice, suspicion, and perhaps danger, but he also saw opportunity. Opportunity to show that courage, intelligence, and compassion could cross worlds, that humanity could be more than a distant legend in alien tales. A soft chime signaled a message from Lyra. It was a holographic projection, a small recording of her smiling face. "Irian, rest tonight. Tomorrow begins the real challenge. Remember, even if the court resists, you are not alone. I chose you for a reason. Together, we will show them what partnership truly means." Irian felt a surge of determination. The princess had chosen him not out of duty or tradition, but out of belief in who he was. That belief was more valuable than any armor or sword he could wield. The next morning, the court reconvened for formal introductions. Irian walked alongside Lyra, feeling every gaze weigh upon him. He noticed the counselor from the previous day, still scowling, and several nobles whispering to one another. A few officers gave him discreet nods, acknowledging his presence without attracting attention. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. During the formal discussions, Irian listened carefully, learning the customs and political intricacies of Zithuria. He noticed patterns, gaps in understanding, and opportunities to help. At one point, a dispute arose over planetary trade agreements. Irian calmly proposed a solution based on human negotiation tactics, blending logic with empathy. The room went silent as the suggestion took hold. Some elders frowned, unused to such reasoning, but others nodded subtly, impressed despite themselves. Lyra caught his eye and gave him a small, encouraging smile. It was a quiet acknowledgement that, even in the eye of the storm, he was making progress. By the end of the day, the hostility of the court had not disappeared, but it had shifted. Whispers were no longer purely derisive. Curiosity began to mix with skepticism. Irian realized that this was the first step. Winning the trust of Zithuria's court would take time, patience, and courage. But he was not deterred. As night fell over the glowing orbital palace, Irian stood at the balcony, looking out at the swirling clouds of Zithuria below. Stars stretched endlessly across the sky, and he felt both small and significant, a human among aliens, an outsider chosen to challenge centuries of tradition. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time he felt the thrill of possibility. The palace was silent around him, yet in the corridors, whispers of his presence continued to stir. Some spoke in admiration, some in doubt, and some in malice. Irian knew that tomorrow would bring new tests, new challenges designed to prove whether a human could truly stand beside a princess of Zithuria. He welcomed them. After all, courage was not measured by origin, and determination did not belong to a single world. In that moment, Irian resolved to face whatever the court, and the galaxy, might throw at him. And so the human prince stood, gazing at the stars, ready to step into a destiny that would not just define him, but challenge the very essence of Zithurian tradition. The morning after the announcement, the palace was quieter than usual, though tension hung thick in the air. Whispers carried through the halls like ripples on water, each one spreading suspicion or doubt. Some nobles avoided Irian's gaze entirely, while others stared at him with barely concealed hostility. The counselors, in particular, had regrouped after the previous day's embarrassment, plotting in secret to undermine the human prince. Irian walked alongside Lyra as she made her rounds through the palace, greeting citizens and officers alike. His mind raced with questions. How deep did the hostility run? Could he truly gain the respect of these alien elites? The corridors, lined with glowing panels that recorded centuries of Zethurian history, seemed almost alive, their soft hum echoing his anxiety. "They will test you at every turn," Lyra said, sensing his unease. Her hand brushed lightly against his, a gesture of reassurance. "Not out of cruelty, but because they fear what they do not understand. Humans are unknown to them. That alone makes you a threat to their comfort." Irian nodded, absorbing her words. "I understand, but fear alone cannot stop me. If I can show them that humans are capable, perhaps they will learn something new about courage, about loyalty." Lyra smiled faintly, though concern lingered in her eyes. "And remember, Irian, you are not alone. I will stand beside you, but you must act with your own strength. The court is not easily swayed." Their first challenge came that afternoon. The council had arranged a diplomatic assembly, inviting leaders from neighboring planets to discuss a trade agreement crucial to Zethuria's economy. The meeting was a trap. The council hoped that Irian's lack of knowledge about Zethurian customs would lead to a diplomatic blunder. The assembly hall was vast, its walls adorned with holographic maps of neighboring systems. Leaders from several star systems hovered in their own floating platforms, observing the proceedings. Irian's task was to present Zethuria's position and propose terms of negotiation. He had studied trade principles on his own world, but alien customs were far more intricate, with layers of etiquette and unspoken rules that could ruin negotiations if misinterpreted. As the discussions began, a counselor leaned toward Irian, speaking softly in Zethurian. "Watch carefully. Every gesture, every word is a test. Fail, and your presence here will bring shame to the princess and your people." Irian nodded silently, taking a deep breath. He recalled human negotiation strategies: patience, empathy, and observation. He decided to start by listening carefully to the alien leaders, noting their priorities and concerns. While the counselors watched him closely, hoping for a misstep, he spoke calmly, asking questions that encouraged dialogue rather than confrontation. To his surprise, his approach worked. The alien leaders responded positively to his direct yet respectful manner. Even when they pushed for concessions that Zethurians had never given, Irian proposed solutions that maintained Zethurian pride while accommodating their needs. The counselors' faces tightened with anger. They had hoped he would fail spectacularly, but Irian's human ingenuity allowed him to navigate the negotiations with subtle brilliance. By the end of the meeting, a preliminary agreement was reached. Some elders nodded reluctantly, their eyes acknowledging his capability despite their pride. The whispers that followed were no longer solely derisive. A few murmurs expressed cautious admiration. Irian realized that his human qualities, patience, empathy, and unconventional problem-solving, were beginning to carve a space for him in a court that had once rejected him outright. But not everyone was impressed. The counselor who had openly challenged him before was now openly plotting. That evening, in the dimly lit halls of the palace, he gathered a small group of conspirators. Their conversation was low and tense, each word laced with anger and ambition. "This human cannot remain," the counselor hissed. "He undermines our traditions, embarrasses us in front of allies, and dares to stand beside the princess as an equal. We cannot allow this to continue." A second counselor, more cautious and calculating, nodded. "We must be subtle. A direct attack would disgrace us and make the princess furious. But there are other ways. We can manipulate the palace rituals, sow doubt among the younger officers, and use the old traditions to question his place here." Another conspirator, younger and braver, suggested, "What about a public demonstration? The trial of honor is next week. If we set conditions that he cannot meet, the court will see him as unworthy." The first counselor's eyes glinted with agreement. "Exactly. And if he fails, the princess will have no choice but to reconsider him. She will not risk her kingdom for a human's pride." Meanwhile, Irian and Lyra were unaware of the growing conspiracy, though they felt the subtle hostility in the air. Lyra took him to the palace archives, a vast chamber containing records and artifacts of Zethurian history. Knowledge is power here, she explained. If you want to survive, you must understand our traditions, our values, and our rules. Only then can you prove yourself. Irian spent hours poring over the ancient texts, learning about ceremonial rituals, planetary laws, and past conflicts. He was fascinated by the depth of the civilization, its rich history, and the careful balance of power that had maintained stability for centuries. Yet he also saw cracks, rigid customs, outdated prejudices, and fear of the unknown. Lyra watched him silently, noting his determination. "You see what many cannot," she said softly. "You see potential where others see only risk. That is why I chose you." Days passed, and Irian became more comfortable in his role, though challenges grew. He noticed small acts of sabotage. Meetings delayed, misinformation spread, subtle attempts to isolate him from key advisors. Yet he responded not with anger, but with observation. He learned to recognize hidden intentions and to navigate the labyrinth of court politics with patience. One evening, as the stars of Zithuria shone brightly over the palace, Irian received a message from one of the palace officers. It was a warning. Some of the counselors were planning to manipulate the upcoming trial of honor to discredit him publicly. The trial was a test of skill, courage, and wisdom, a ceremonial event that determined one's ability to hold influence within the court. Failure would not just be humiliating, it could mark him as unfit to stand beside the princess. Irian studied the warning carefully. The conspirators intended to use the oldest, most dangerous trials, ones that even experienced Zithurian nobles had struggled to complete. But he refused to be intimidated. He spent the night preparing, practicing strategies, and learning every detail he could about the trial. His human perspective allowed him to see possibilities the counselors had overlooked, routes, tools, and solutions that were unconventional but effective. On the day of the trial, the ceremonial grounds were filled with onlookers. The air was tense, charged with anticipation and skepticism. Irian could feel the hostility radiating from some counselors, their gazes sharp and critical. The trial began with traditional tests of strength and agility, which Irian managed carefully, blending observation with careful action. When he reached the final challenge, a complex puzzle designed to test strategy and wisdom, he applied human reasoning. He noticed patterns that Zithurians had taken for granted, exploiting logic that seemed unusual to the court but undeniable in its effectiveness. Slowly, the crowd began to realize that the human prince was succeeding, not by chance, but by skill and intellect. The conspirators' whispers turned to alarm. They had planned his failure meticulously, yet every obstacle they placed in his path was overcome with ingenuity and calm. Irian's performance sent ripples through the court. Some young nobles began to whisper in admiration, while elders could not hide their astonishment. After completing the trial, Irian stood before the assembled court, panting but triumphant. The princess approached him, her expression proud and relieved. "You have done more than succeed," she said, her voice echoing through the ceremonial hall. "You have shown that courage and wisdom are not confined to any one species. You honor not just yourself, but the potential of all who are willing to rise above fear and prejudice." Though the court was still divided, cracks in the wall of hostility were visible. The conspirators retreated, frustrated but unwilling to act openly, knowing that the public had witnessed the human prince's skill and composure. That evening in the quiet of the palace gardens, Irian and Lyra walked side by side, the twin moons of Zithuria reflected in the still waters, casting a serene glow. "They will try again," Lyra said softly. "This court is old and resistant to change." "Some will never accept you, no matter what you do," Irian nodded. "I understand, but today was proof that progress is possible. I may not win everyone over, but I can earn respect, and respect can be stronger than fear." Lyra smiled, a mixture of admiration and affection in her eyes. "You have the heart of a leader, Irian. That is what matters. The rest will follow in time." As they walked through the garden, the distant stars and the glowing palace around them seemed less intimidating. Irian felt a sense of purpose growing within him. He was no longer just a visitor or an outsider. He was part of something larger, a force that could change the kingdom from within, one act of courage and wisdom at a time. The night passed quietly, but in the shadows, the conspirators whispered still. Their plans would continue, and the court would remain a battlefield of loyalty, tradition, and ambition. Irian knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, yet he welcomed it. Each challenge was an opportunity to show that humanity, with all its strengths and imperfections, could stand proudly among the stars. And so, the human prince prepared for the battles yet to come, both seen and unseen. The court's hostility had not disappeared. It had grown more cunning, but he was ready. With the princess at his side, with his mind sharp and his spirit unwavering, Irian faced the uncertain future with determination. He would prove that courage, intelligence, and compassion were not limited by species, and that a human could indeed shape the destiny of a kingdom that had once rejected him outright. The days following the trial of honor were both triumphant and tense. Irian's success had earned him recognition among some of the younger nobles and officers, yet the court's hostility had not disappeared. The conspirators remained in the shadows, plotting, waiting for the moment when they could strike and discredit him once more. Irian understood that earning respect in Xithuria would be a long, uphill journey. The palace seemed more alive than ever. Holographic panels displayed events from across the kingdom, advisors hurried through corridors, and the distant hum of energy fields kept the palace alight with a constant glow. Irian walked these halls with a growing sense of purpose. He no longer felt merely like a visitor in a foreign world. He felt like a part of its unfolding story. Lyra joined him one morning as he practiced his understanding of Xithurian customs. "The council is uneasy," she said quietly, her eyes reflecting concern. "They do not like that their plans failed. You have shown skill, yes, but they will attempt something greater, something dangerous." Irian nodded. "I expected as much. I cannot rely solely on skill or luck. I need to understand them, anticipate their moves, and find ways to counteract their schemes." She smiled faintly. "And that is why I trust you." Soon after, news came of a diplomatic delegation arriving from a distant system, one with whom Xithuria had maintained a tense but stable alliance. The delegation's presence was a test in itself, orchestrated by the conspirators. They had spread misinformation to the visiting dignitaries, hoping to create a conflict that would embarrass Irian in front of the princess and the court. The day of the delegation's visit, the palace was bustling with activity. Irian stood beside Lyra in the grand reception hall, its walls shimmering with energy and adorned with historical tapestries that depicted the greatest Xithurian leaders. The alien dignitaries arrived in their ships, their forms elegant and foreign, each representing a different culture and interest. The head of the delegation, a tall being named Vorel, regarded Irian with thinly veiled skepticism. "A human prince," Vorel said, his voice calm but pointed. "I have heard much about your unusual appointment. I hope Xithuria has not made a mistake." Irian bowed respectfully. "I understand your concern. I am here to serve Xithuria and to ensure that our discussions benefit all parties. I am ready to listen, to learn, and to work with your expertise." The meeting began, and the counselors watched closely, their eyes sharp with expectation. Irian quickly realized that the diplomats were testing him, probing for gaps in knowledge and for mistakes in protocol. Yet he remained calm. He spoke with clarity, asking questions that clarified intentions, and proposed solutions that balanced Xithurian interests with those of the delegation. To everyone's surprise, including the counselors, Irian found creative solutions to potential conflicts. Where tradition would have demanded rigid responses, he offered compromise, reasoning, and empathy. The assembly began to see him not just as an outsider, but as a bridge between worlds. Vorel, initially skeptical, now nodded slowly in acknowledgement. "Your approach is unconventional but effective," he said. "Xithuria may indeed have chosen wisely." Even as the delegation left with agreements successfully negotiated, Irian knew the conspirators were planning their next move. They would not be deterred by diplomacy. That evening, in a hidden chamber deep within the palace, the counselors gathered. Their voices were low and tense. "This human success cannot continue," hissed the counselor who had opposed Irian from the start. "We must act decisively. The trial of wisdom approaches, and it will be our opportunity." A younger conspirator leaned forward eagerly. "We can manipulate the conditions. He will be tested in ways he cannot anticipate, and if he fails, the court will lose confidence in him. The princess may have to reconsider." The first counselor's eyes glinted with malicious intent. "Good. Prepare the grounds. Make sure the trial tests every aspect of his knowledge, courage, and strategy. Leave nothing to chance." Meanwhile, Irian was unaware of the conspiracy's depth, but he sensed the growing tension. He and Lyra walked through the palace gardens that night, their steps soft against the glowing stones. "They are planning something," Irian said quietly. "I can feel it." The hostility, the whispers, it's more organized now. Lyra nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You are right, but you have learned more in the last weeks than anyone could have imagined. Trust yourself, Irian, trust your instincts. And remember, you are not facing this alone." The trial of wisdom was unlike anything Irian had faced before. It was held in the central courtyard of the palace, a massive open space surrounded by statues of past rulers. The trial consisted of several stages, puzzles of logic, strategy challenges, and tests of leadership. The crowd of nobles, counselors, and citizens watched eagerly. The conspirators had altered the trial subtly, adding layers of difficulty designed to expose Irian's ignorance. He began with the first stage, a test of reasoning and pattern recognition. While Zethurians relied on established methods, Irian approached it from a human perspective, noticing patterns they had overlooked. He solved the challenge quickly, earning murmurs of surprise from the onlookers. The second stage tested leadership and decision-making under pressure. Irian was asked to guide a team of mixed Zethurian and human cadets through a simulated crisis. The conspirators had made the scenario unpredictable, expecting him to falter. Yet Irian remained calm. He listened to each participant, adapted to changing circumstances, and coordinated the team effectively. By the end of the simulation, not only had he succeeded, but he had demonstrated qualities of empathy, foresight, and innovation that impressed even the most skeptical observers. Finally, the third stage was a complex challenge that combined strategy, negotiation, and moral decision-making. Irian faced a scenario in which he had to resolve a conflict between two rival factions without sacrificing lives or honor. While the counselors expected him to rely on brute force or tradition, he approached the problem with patience and insight, negotiating a solution that respected both sides and ensured lasting peace. The crowd erupted in applause. Even some of the older counselors, who had once scorned him, could not deny the brilliance of his human approach. He had succeeded where many Zethurians would have failed, not by following their customs blindly, but by applying courage, empathy, and intelligence. After the trial, Lyra approached Irian, her expression a mixture of pride and relief. "You have done more than succeed, Irian. You have shown that wisdom is not defined by tradition alone. You honor not just yourself, but the future of Zethuria." Irian smiled, though he knew the conspirators had not given up. The trial had exposed their schemes, but they would return with more cunning plans. Still, he felt a growing confidence in his ability to navigate the challenges of the court. Each trial, each obstacle, was an opportunity to demonstrate that humans were more than capable of standing alongside Zethurians as equals. That night, as the palace lights glowed softly against the black expanse of space, Irian and Lyra stood on the balcony, looking over the city below. The domes and towers of Zethuria shimmered like stars fallen to the planet. "They will not accept us easily," Lyra said. "But they will learn. They will see that strength, wisdom, and courage are not limited to Zethurians." Irian nodded. "And we will show them that unity, trust, and understanding can overcome fear and prejudice. The court may resist, but they cannot stop what is just and right." The palace gardens below were quiet, but shadows moved in the corners. The conspirators had not vanished. They whispered plans, but their influence had weakened. For the first time, Irian felt that his human qualities, creativity, courage, and empathy, were beginning to reshape the court, even if slowly. In the following days, Irian continued to learn and adapt. He spent time with young nobles, teaching them strategies drawn from human history and problem-solving. Some laughed at first, but soon they began to appreciate the value of his perspective. Even older officers, though cautious, began to acknowledge his insights. The conspirators, frustrated by their repeated failures, decided to escalate their schemes. They planned to orchestrate a crisis, a simulated attack on the palace, to test Irian in a life-threatening situation, hoping he would falter. But Irian, ever observant, began noticing signs of unusual activity in the palace. Shifts in guard patterns, whispers among officers, and coded messages in the archives. He realized that the conspirators' plans were more dangerous than he had imagined. Rather than panic, he prepared. He studied defensive strategies, coordinated with loyal officers, and devised contingency plans. When the day of the simulated crisis arrived, Irian led the response with calm and precision. His human intuition, combined with his understanding of Zethurian tactics, allowed him to anticipate the moves of the attackers and protect the palace effectively. By the end of the event, the court could no longer deny his capability. Irian had survived not by brute strength alone, but by intelligence, adaptability, and courage. He had shown that humanity could meet the highest standards of Zethuria and even exceed them in unexpected ways. As night fell, Lyra and Irian stood together, watching the stars reflect in the palace's glass domes. "You have changed the court more than I imagined," Lyra said. "Some may never fully accept it, but others will follow your example." Irian looked at her, determination in his eyes. "And we will continue. For every challenge, for every test, we will prove that courage, wisdom, and compassion are not limited by origin. Humanity can be a force for good, even among the stars." And so the human prince faced the court with renewed strength. The hostility had not vanished, but it had been tempered by respect and awe. Irian had not only survived the trials, they had become a stage for his courage and intelligence. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but he was ready. Together with the princess, he would continue to transform a court that had once rejected him, proving that humans could indeed stand as equals in a galaxy of wonders. The palace of Zethuria shimmered under the glow of twin moons as tension filled the air. Rumors had spread throughout the court that the conspirators were planning a final scheme to discredit Irian, the human prince. Unlike previous attempts, this plan was bold, public, and dangerous. The counselors had orchestrated what they called the Trial of Legacy, a test meant to expose any weakness in leadership, courage, and wisdom. Failure would not only humiliate Irian, but also force Princess Lyra to reconsider her choice. Irian had spent the previous nights preparing. With the help of loyal officers and advisors who had begun to see his value, he studied every aspect of the trial that could be manipulated against him. He observed the palace's defenses, reviewed old protocols, and devised strategies to counteract both expected and unexpected challenges. Every detail mattered. The conspirators would exploit even the smallest misstep. Lyra joined him in the grand hall the morning of the trial. Her presence was calming, her confidence in him unwavering. "This is their final attempt," she said softly. "But you have learned, grown, and proven yourself more times than they could count. Trust your instincts, Irian. You are ready." Irian nodded. "I know. I will not let fear guide me. Today I will show the court what humans can achieve when they act with courage and wisdom." The Trial of Legacy began in the palace's central courtyard, a vast arena surrounded by towering statues of past rulers and glowing banners representing Zethuria's history. Citizens, officers, nobles, and visiting dignitaries gathered, filling the air with anticipation. The conspirators watched from the shadows, their eyes cold and calculating, ready to capitalize on any mistake. The trial was divided into 3 stages, each designed to test a different aspect of leadership. The first stage focused on intelligence and strategy. Irian was presented with a complex scenario, a simulated planetary crisis in which multiple factions were in conflict, resources were scarce, and the outcome would determine the stability of Zethuria. Many in the court expected him to falter. A human, after all, had never led in a Zethurian test of this magnitude. Yet Irian approached the challenge with calm observation. He analyzed patterns, listened to all perspectives, and proposed solutions that maintained fairness, balanced power, and minimized conflict. His human intuition allowed him to consider angles the conspirators had not anticipated. Slowly, the murmurs in the crowd shifted from doubt to astonishment. The second stage tested courage and decisiveness under pressure. The conspirators had designed a perilous obstacle course that mimicked real-life dangers on Zethuria, volatile energy fields, unstable platforms, and timed hazards. Many assumed Irian would struggle with the unfamiliar environment. But Irian relied on careful calculation, adaptability, and fearlessness. He observed each hazard, anticipated potential outcomes, and moved with precision. At a moment when a platform threatened to collapse, he acted instinctively, saving not only himself but a cadet participating in the trial. The crowd gasped and then erupted in quiet applause. Even some older counselors could not hide their astonishment at the human prince's quick thinking and bravery. Finally, the third stage combined diplomacy, morality, and leadership. Irian was asked to negotiate a peace treaty between two rival factions while under extreme pressure. The conspirators had manipulated the scenario to make success nearly impossible. One faction had been given misleading intelligence, and both sides were on the brink of open conflict. Irian approached the situation methodically. He listened carefully, asked questions that encouraged cooperation, and proposed compromises that respected both sides' honor. When one faction threatened to walk away, he remained calm, appealing to shared goals and emphasizing the benefits of unity. His human perspective, valuing empathy and practicality over rigid tradition, turned a potential disaster into a successful resolution. By the end of the trial, Irian stood before the gathered court, exhausted but triumphant. The counselors, who had orchestrated the entire scheme to prove him unworthy, could no longer deny his abilities. The younger nobles whispered in admiration, and even some of the older officers nodded with reluctant respect. Lyra approached him, her eyes shining. "You have done it," she said softly. "You have shown them that courage, intelligence, and compassion are not limited to a single species. You honor not just yourself, but the potential of all who strive to do what is right." Irian looked around at the assembled crowd. The hostility that had once been so fierce had begun to dissolve. Many could not hide their newfound respect, though a few stubborn conspirators still lingered, plotting quietly. He knew the journey was not yet over, but this victory had shifted the balance. Later that evening, the conspirators gathered one last time in secret. Their faces were grim. "He has survived every test," one whispered. "Even our traps have failed. The court will follow him now, and the princess has shown unwavering support. What can we do?" The first counselor slammed a clawed hand against the table. "We cannot act openly. His influence grows by the day, and the people are starting to see his value. Our only choice is to adapt or be left behind." Meanwhile, Irian and Lyra walked through the palace gardens, the twin moons reflecting in the still waters. The air was filled with the fragrance of alien flora, and the gentle glow of bioluminescent plants illuminated their path. "They are finally realizing that fear cannot dictate leadership," Lyra said, her voice soft but full of pride. "You have changed the court, Irian. You have shown them a new way forward." Irian smiled, a mixture of relief and determination. "It is not just about me. It is about what humans, and by extension all outsiders, can bring to this world. Courage, creativity, and compassion can inspire change even in the oldest traditions." In the days that followed, Irian's influence grew. He worked alongside Lyra to implement reforms that blended human ingenuity with Zethurian wisdom. Trade policies were modernized, defense strategies improved, and education systems expanded to include new methods of learning. The court began to transform. Those who had resisted now saw the benefits of his approach, while the younger generation embraced the possibilities he represented. The palace, once a place of tension and suspicion, began to hum with energy and innovation. Citizens noticed the changes, and even distant systems began to take interest in Zethuria's evolving leadership. Irian's human perspective had brought fresh solutions to long-standing problems, and his courage and integrity had inspired others to act with similar values. The final confrontation with the remaining conspirators occurred when they attempted to disrupt a ceremonial assembly celebrating the completion of the reforms. Irian, anticipating their move, had coordinated with loyal officers to ensure the assembly proceeded smoothly. When the conspirators tried to incite chaos, they were met not with anger but with organized resistance. Their schemes were exposed, and they were removed from positions of influence without bloodshed. The court finally accepted Irian fully. Where once there had been doubt and hostility, there was now respect and cooperation. He had proven that a human, far from being weak or unsuitable, could stand as a leader among Zethurians, not by overpowering them, but by complementing their strengths with his own. In the palace's grand balcony, Irian and Lyra stood together, looking out over the city of Zethuria. Lights from the towers and spires shimmered like stars fallen to the planet's surface. Citizens moved about, their faces filled with hope and curiosity. "You have changed everything," Lyra said, her hand brushing against his. "The court, the people, the future, they see now what I have always known. You are a leader, Irian, not because you are human, but because of your heart and your mind. Irian looked at the glowing horizon, feeling the weight and joy of what they had accomplished. We have done it together, he replied. Humans and Zethurians side by side, learning from each other. This is only the beginning. There are greater challenges ahead, but now we face them as equals, as partners. The night passed with celebration and quiet reflection. The palace was alive with music, laughter, and conversation, a testament to the new era that had begun. Irian had not only survived the hostility of the court, but he had transformed it. His human qualities, courage, wisdom, and empathy, had become a bridge between worlds, inspiring change that would endure for generations. In the days that followed, Irian continued his work, mentoring young nobles, advising on policy, and exploring new ways to strengthen the kingdom. He never forgot the lessons learned from the trials: patience, observation, and the courage to act even when others doubted him. Each step forward was a testament to the idea that true strength comes not from birthright or species, but from character and determination. As he stood once more on the balcony with Lyra, watching Zethuria glow under the twin moons, Irian felt a profound sense of belonging. He was no longer an outsider. He was a prince, a partner, and a symbol of what humans could achieve. The court had been hostile, yes, but through perseverance, intelligence, and courage, he had earned their respect. The future of Zethuria was no longer bound by fear or tradition alone. With Irian and Lyra leading together, the kingdom would thrive, embracing innovation while honoring its history. And in the stars beyond, humans and Zethurians alike would see that courage, wisdom, and compassion were not limited by the world one was born on. Irian smiled, the stars reflecting in his eyes. The journey had been long and perilous, but he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more certain of his place in the universe. Together with Lyra, he would continue to lead, to inspire, and to prove that humans could stand proudly among the greatest civilizations of the galaxy. The court that had once rejected him now looked to him for guidance. The conspirators had fallen, and the people were inspired. Irian had transformed not only the palace, but the very heart of Zethuria. And so, under the twin moons and the endless expanse of space, the human prince stood tall, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. Knowing that courage, wisdom, and compassion could overcome even the deepest hostility, and that humanity could indeed shine among the stars. A human prince was chosen by the princess. The court turned hostile.